I learned long ago that silence can reveal more than confession. The moment I stepped into his parents' living room and every voice died mid-sentence, I felt that subtle shift where politeness collapses and truth leaks through. Whatever they had been discussing, it wasn't meant for me. For 3 years, I had lived a careful double life, one of tailored suits and boardroom decisions hidden beneath thrifted sweaters and a modest apartment. I loved my fiancé for his gentleness, his belief in simple joys, and I chose to meet him there, unburdened by numbers and titles. But when he invited me to meet his parents in their quiet suburban home, I decided to arrive as the version of myself they expected, unassuming, financially fragile, and observant. I didn't know then that the house itself seemed to recognize me before they did. The closet door stayed open longer than it needed to. Morning light slipped through the blinds and rested on the clothes like it was deciding something. I stood there barefoot, holding a sweater that had softened over the years, the fabric worn thin at the elbows. It smelled faintly of detergent and time, the kind of smell that tells you something has stayed. That morning felt quiet, not peaceful, listening, as if the apartment knew I was leaving and wanted to remember me correctly. There was a time when my mornings sounded different, phones vibrating before sunrise, shoes clicking against polished floors. A calendar that belonged to everyone but me. Back then, I dressed like a promise. Like someone who was going somewhere important, and for a while I don't tell people that part often, not because I'm ashamed, but because it feels like another lifetime folded neatly and placed on a shelf I don't visit anymore. And I didn't lose that life, I chose to leave it. I remember sitting alone in my office one evening, city lights blinking like they were trying to stay awake. I had just closed a deal that would be talked about for months. My phone buzzed with congratulations, and I stared at the glass wall in front of me and felt nothing move inside. That scared me more than failure ever had, so I began letting go quietly, one thing at a time. The extra apartment, the subscriptions, the clothes that felt like costumes, downsizing felt less like loss and more like relief. Like exhaling after holding your breath so long you forgot you were doing it. I learned how little I actually needed, how silence could be generous, how time could stretch when it wasn't being sold. Then I met him. He didn't ask where I saw myself in 5 years. He asked what kind of mornings I liked. He noticed things without announcing it. He listened the way people do when they aren't planning their reply. Our life together didn't rise. It settled into routines, into shared dinners and lamps left on too long, into comfort that didn't need explaining. He never knew about the career I folded away, and I never corrected the assumptions he didn't make. With him, I wasn't impressive, I was present. That felt like honesty. Still, there's a quiet weight to keeping something to yourself, even when it's gentle, even when it feels harmless. Bekrinters and a Pershan Begam. Secrets. Eat, don't shout. They hum low and steady beneath conversations and pauses. Alkan. I felt it when he spoke about his parents. They're practical people, he said once, rinsing a mug at the sink. They care about stability. He smiled when he said it, but his eyes didn't. That night, lying beside him, I stared at the ceiling and made a decision I didn't say out loud. If I was going to meet them, I would arrive as I am now. Not the version with sharp edges and impressive answers, the quiet one, the one I chose. I wanted to see who they were when they thought I had nothing to offer but myself, so I packed accordingly. The suitcase lay open on the bed, patient. I folded clothes slowly, carefully, plain jeans, neutral sweaters, and shoes that didn't announce anything. Each item felt like a sentence rehearsed in advance. In the bathroom mirror, I practiced understatement. What do you do? Oh, I manage. Do you enjoy it? It's enough. Not lies, just smaller truths. Still, when I zipped the suitcase closed, my fingers lingered on the metal pull. I felt the choice settle into my chest, heavy and quiet. Was I protecting the love we'd built, or was I testing it, pressing gently to see where it might give? The apartment looked the same as always, worn floors, a chair by the window where I read most evenings. Nothing trying to impress it. I walked through the rooms once more, didn't straighten anything, didn't change a thing. In the kitchen, the clock ticked softly. It always ran a minute slow. I liked that. It felt honest. He called my name from the hallway. You ready? I said yes, even though a part of me wasn't. The city thinned as we drove, grass and steel giving way to houses and trees. I watched my reflection in the window. Just a woman in a sweater, someone easy to overlook. At a stoplight, he reached for my hand. His thumb brushed my knuckles absent-mindedly. The way he does when he's calm. I think they'll like you, he said. I smiled. Not because I believed it, but because I wanted to. Again, as the road stretched ahead, I felt the folded life stir somewhere deep inside me, not demanding, just present. Okay, a reminder that what we put away never really leaves, it just waits. The house appeared as the sky dulled. Yukang, neat, still, watching. I took a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Whatever happened next, I had already chosen my posture. And I had arrived carrying less, hoping it would be enough. But as we pulled into the driveway, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't the only one bringing something hidden inside. The sky was the color of old paper, not quite white, not quite gray, just tired. The road stretched ahead of us in long, quiet lines, flanked by trees stripped bare for winter. Their branches reached upward like unfinished thoughts. Nothing moved except us. Even the wind felt restrained. Inside down the car, the heater hummed a point and porifers 4 bound. Inside the car, the heater hummed softly, a steady, careful sound, the kind meant to comfort without asking questions. He drove with both hands on the wheel, relaxed but focused, like this road belonged to him, like he had driven it 100 times before and still remembered where the curves would be. Yeka. My mom always overcooked on Sundays, he said, smiling a little. Roast chicken, potatoes, everything soft. I watched the way his eyes stayed on the road when he spoke, how his voice softened without effort. There was no performance in it, just memory. She hated wasting food, he added, even if no one wanted seconds. I nodded. Not because I had anything to add, but because listening felt like the right posture. The trees thinned as we got closer. Houses appeared in small, deliberate clusters. Each one seemed to know its place. Lawns trimmed down to winter stubble, mailboxes standing upright like sentries. He talked about his childhood dinners, about the way his father always sat at the head of the table, quiet, observant, about his mother correcting his posture with a gentle hand on his shoulder. She's very polite, he said. You'll like her. I noticed what he didn't say. There was no mention of money, no talk of success. No measuring words, just warmth, routine, structure. I wondered if that absence was intentional or inherited. The house appeared suddenly, as if it had been waiting for us to notice it. A modest 2-story, painted a soft beige that blended into the overcast sky. The yard was clean. Crow or break. Too clean. Not empty, but careful. Windows stared back at us. Not unfriendly, just alert. He pulled into the driveway and turned off the engine. The sudden silence pressed in, thick and immediate. I could hear the ticking of cooling metal, the faint sound of a wind chime somewhere nearby. Young, this is it, he said. I smiled. The kind you offer when there's nowhere else to put your nerves. He stepped out first, moving easily, familiarly, like the ground knew his feet. I stayed in the car a moment longer, hands resting in my lap. The air outside looked cold. When I opened the door, it greeted me with a sharp breath. Winter slipped under my sweater and settled against my skin. I stood slowly, letting the chill anchor me. The house loomed closer now, not larger, just nearer, details sharpened. A wreath on the door, slightly faded. Doka. A porch light turned off, though it was still daytime. This house had seen people arrive like this before. It had watched them straighten their coats, adjust their expressions. I closed the car door gently, too gently. My chest tightened, not painfully, just enough to notice, like a reminder placed carefully under the ribs. He reached for my hand as we walked up the path. His palm was warm, familiar, steady. They're probably waiting at the window, he joked lightly. I glanced up without meaning to. Kanged. The curtains were drawn just enough to suggest someone could be standing behind them, or not. I couldn't tell. Each step toward the porch felt measured. My shoes sounded louder than they should have on the concrete. The wind moved through the bare branches above us, producing a dry, whispering sound. Again, I wondered what they saw when they looked at me. A woman in a plain coat. No symbols, no signals. Someone easy to misunderstand. He rang the bell. The chime echoed inside the house, muffled but clear. Then silence again. Longer this time. I shifted my weight slightly, feeling the porch boards respond beneath me. The house exhaled through its walls, old wood holding its breath. Behind the door, movement, footsteps, slow, deliberate. I straightened without realizing it, smoothed my sleeves, felt the old instinct rise, present yourself, then stopped myself, no. Arrive as you are. The door opened. His mother stood there, framed by warm light. Her hair was neatly styled, her sweater pressed. She smiled immediately, but carefully, like the smile had been waiting for its cue. Oh, she said, you must be her. Quick lines, not sure Louding Myers. Her eyes moved over me quickly. Not rudely. Efficiently. I nodded. Yes. She stepped aside to let us in, gesturing toward the doorway. The house behind her smelled faintly of polish and something baked earlier in the day. "Come in," she said. "It's cold out there." The threshold felt higher than it was. I stepped over it slowly, aware of the moment in a way that surprised me. As if crossing into something that would remember me, inside the air was warmer, but not softer. The floor beneath my feet was firm, immaculate, no clutter, no room for error. His father appeared from the living room, wiping his hands on a cloth. He nodded at me, a polite acknowledgement that stopped short of welcome. "So this is her," he said, not unkindly, but not warmly either. I smiled again, held it. They exchanged a glance, quick, practiced, the kind that carries meaning without sound. His mother took my coat, folding it carefully before placing it on a hook. She did it with intention, like she was handling something that needed to be returned in the same condition. "Kak, did you have a nice drive?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "It was quiet." She nodded approvingly. Quiet seemed like the right answer. We forever deeper into the house. Brer ringed for the prefer like the right answer. We moved deeper into the house. Every room felt composed. Furniture placed with thought. Photographs aligned precisely, nothing leaning, nothing out of place. This home valued balance. "Kenna." He began talking again, filling the space with familiarity, jokes about his childhood. A story about a broken window and a forgiven mistake. They laughed at the right moments. I listened. I noticed the way their eyes returned to me when he spoke, as if measuring how I received him, as if my reactions mattered more than my words. We paused in the entryway for a moment longer than necessary. No one quite sure who should move first. I stood there, hands folded loosely in front of me, feeling the house take note, feeling the weight of first impressions settle like dust. Somewhere deeper inside, a clock ticked steady, unforgiving. I realized then that whatever waited behind this politeness wasn't hostility, it was evaluation. And as his mother gestured for us to sit smiling with that same careful expression, I felt the tightening in my chest return. Not fear, anticipation, because I knew before anyone said another word that this house was already deciding who I was, and the door had only just closed behind us. The house smelled like polish and something older beneath it. Not unpleasant, just preserved, the kind of scent that lingers in places where nothing is allowed to wear out completely. I stepped inside and the door closed behind us with a soft, final sound. Not loud, just decisive. The outside stayed outside, the warmth wrapped around me carefully, like it was testing whether I belonged in it. Natsa menera napa poured napa saf pence and dat pavins upon their daring. "Please," his mother said, gesturing down. "You can leave your shoes there." I looked at the floor. A neat line of shoes waited by the door, leather mostly, dark browns and blacks. Soles still sharp at the edges, shoes that had places to go and reasons for going. I bent down and slipped mine off slowly. The floor was cool beneath my socks. My shoes, soft, worn, familiar, settled beside the others like they were apologizing for taking up space. I noticed it immediately, how mine leaned slightly inward, how theirs stood straight. No one said anything, but the room did. His father nodded politely. His mother smiled. "The kind of smile that arrives on time but doesn't stay long drive?" she asked. Not too bad," I said. My voice sounded smaller in here, or maybe the walls were just better listeners. We moved into the living room. The carpet muffled our steps. It was thick, well cared for. It didn't give much when you walked on it, like it was proud of that. The furniture sat exactly where it was meant to. Nothing angled, nothing casual. Framed photographs lined the mantel. Family holidays, formal smiles, moments that had been selected carefully and never rearranged. I sat where they indicated. The couch didn't creak, it didn't shift. Hardak, tense whack, hour. It held me politely. His mother disappeared briefly and returned with a tray. "Teacups," offered Tonning Berturn. "Teacups. Real ones. Thin porcelain with faint blue lines near the rim. Would you like some?" she asked. "Yes, thank you." She poured slowly, watching the level rise. She didn't smop, she didn't smill a dropple. The tea smiled. Clean. Like it was chosen to offend no one. We talked about the weather. "Yeah, it's been colder than usual," his father said. "Fadrid forwarding namber dan beramberding pole." "Yes," I replied. "The trees look tired." He nodded, as if that was the correct observation. Traffic came next, how the roads had changed. How things used to be quieter. I answered when spoken to, listened when I wasn't. Every pause felt longer than it needed to be, like each silence was being filled with something unspoken. And I felt eyes on me, not staring, but noting. The way you note a detail in a room you might redecorate later. His mother's gaze moved subtly my sweater, my hands, the way I held my cup. She smiled when our eyes met, then looked away. She didn't look at me long enough to be rude, just long enough to remember. His father asked where I was from. I told him. He nodded again. A sound escaped him, not quite approval, more like acknowledgement. And what do you do? He asked. The room shifted, not dramatically, just enough. I had rehearsed this. Still, my mouth felt dry. I manage, I said. Various things. His mother tilted her head slightly. Not questioning, adjusting. Oh, she said, that must keep you busy sometimes, I replied. She smiled in her. I noticed how quickly she looked to her husband afterward, how they shared a glance that lasted half a second too long to be accidental, mesmerized, catalogued. He launched into a story then about growing up here, about school mornings and packed lunches. His voice filled the room easily. This was his place. The walls recognized him. I watched his parents soften when he spoke, the way his mother's shoulders lowered, the way his father's mouth eased into something like pride when he laughed. They laughed. When he paused, they waited. I smiled at the right moments, the right moments, nodded when expected. You can. I felt like a guest at a table where the rules were learned long ago. His mother offered cookies, homemade. Neatly stacked. Please, she said, placing the plate closer to him than to me. I took one anyway. It tasted fine, sweet controlled. I chewed carefully, aware of the sound, the way crumbs stayed where they fell. My shoes waited by the door. I could picture them there, leaning quietly against a wall that had seen better posture. I wondered what they were saying about me without words. She's polite, she's quiet, she doesn't say much. Does she have plans? Does she fit? The questions hovered in the air, invisible but present. Like dust you only see when the light hits it just right. At one point, his mother stood and adjusted a photo frame that hadn't moved. She straightened it anyway. Then smoothed the edge of the tablecloth, order restored. I felt myself shrinking without meaning to. Not physically, internally. Folding my edges in, I realized then that this wasn't unkindness, it was assessment. They weren't trying to hurt me, they were trying to understand where I landed in the structure they'd built. And I didn't know yet whether there was space for me. His father asked another question, about my family. Brief. General, I answered simply. That's nice, he said. Nice. Lived comfortably in this house. Nice was safe. The clock on the wall ticked, loud enough to notice. Each second landed cleanly without echo. I sipped my tea, even though it had cooled. No one asked follow-up questions. No one dug deeper. It was as if they had already learned what they needed to know. When his mother stood again and suggested we move to the dining room soon, I nodded and stood with her. As I rose, the couch released me without sound. I caught sight of the entryway as we walked past. The shoes still waited, unchanged. Mine hadn't moved closer to theirs. They hadn't shifted to make room. I felt a quiet understanding settle in my chest. Not heavy, just firm. First impressions don't always arrive with words. And sometimes they sit patiently by the door. As we followed his parents down the hallway, the floor creaked once beneath my step. Soft, almost fond. Like the house remembered something, I wondered what it would remember about me and whether it had already decided. The light in the room shifted sometime in the afternoon, not enough for anyone to comment on it. Just enough to notice if you were paying attention. It slid across the wall and settled near the bookshelf, catching dust in the air like it wanted to show me how much was floating there. Things you don't see unless the angle is right. We were still sitting where we had been. Teacups half empty, cookies mostly untouched, and the conversation moved the way polite conversations do, slow, circular, careful not to step anywhere sharp. Then it drifted. So, his father said, folding his hands together, "What kind of work do you do again?" His voice wasn't unkind, but it wasn't casual either. I felt it before I answered, that familiar tightening. The place where truth usually waits to be filtered. I smiled small. "Oh," I said, "nothing too complicated." Now, the room leaned in, not visibly, but it listened. "I manage a few things," I continued. "Schedules, people, mostly just making sure things run." His mother nodded too quickly, like she'd already prepared that response. "That sounds practical," she said. I let the word sit there. Practical, but non-practicable. Practical, she said. I let the word sit there. Practical. "It keeps me busy enough," I added softly. "But I like having time." Time was the wrong word. His father's jaw tightened, just for a second, then released. Like a door being closed carefully instead of slammed. "And you're happy with that?" he asked. I paused. Longer than necessary silence gathered between us. It didn't rush to fill itself. "I am," I said finally. "It's simple. Yung Simple did something to the air. His mother adjusted her grip on her cup. Her smile stayed, but it thrinned. Ptrake, Puwind. She nodded again, slower this time, like she was filing something away. That's good, she said. Not everyone needs. More. I watched the word settle, watched how it moved between them without being picked up. He didn't notice. He was smiling, leaning back comfortably, talking about a hiking trail he wanted to try in the spring, about maybe planting herbs on the balcony, about how we didn't need much space, just good light. Something manageable, he said cheerfully. I looked at him then, really looked. His ease, his certainty. He spoke about the future like it was a small, warm thing you could carry in your hands without fear of dropping it. Ukane. His parents listened differently when he spoke. Their bodies softened, their eyes warmed. This was familiar ground. A future they could recognize. I stayed quiet, I nodded when appropriate, smiled when cued. Inside, I was shrinking my sentences, trimming them down, folding myself smaller than necessary, like a letter meant to fit an envelope it didn't quite belong in. Nakan stuff and never to kek, and his mother asked if I'd ever thought about moving up. The phrase landed gently, but it carried weight. King, I think about balance more than advancement, I said. I like knowing my evenings are my own. She blinked. Once. That's nice, she said again. Nice returned. Comfortable. Safe. His father cleared his throat. When I was your age, he began, I worked long hours. Q nun serbang brzak stak. I worked long hours. Still do, I suppose. I nodded respectfully. It was important to build something solid, he continued, for the family. He looked at his son when he said it. Not at me. I admire that, I said, and I did, truly. Cow? But admiration didn't mean imitation anymore. The silence that followed felt heavier, less curious, more resolved. Okay. I realized then that my answers weren't easing them, they were unsettling them, not because I was inadequate, but because I wasn't following the script they knew how to read. My humility wasn't registering as modesty. It was reading as absence, no ambition, no hunger, no upward trajectory to measure. His mother set her cup down carefully, too carefully. Well, she said lightly, standing up, as long as you're happy. The way she said it made happiness sound like a temporary condition. She moved toward the kitchen, and the room exhaled slightly. His father followed her with his eyes, then stood as well. The space they'd occupied didn't fill back in right away. He reached for my hand. Nyan, they like you, he said, quietly confident. I smiled at him. Through the doorway, I could hear the faint clink of dishes. Low voices, I could hear the faint clink. Low voices. Words blurred by distance and walls. I didn't strain to listen. I didn't need to. I had seen enough. I sat there, hands folded in my lap, feeling the shape of myself as they'd just received it. How easily I'd made myself smaller, how natural it felt. There was a time when I'd been praised for doing the opposite, for speaking clearly, for taking up space, for owning numbers that made people sit straighter. That woman still existed, folded, waiting. But here, in this room, she stayed quiet. I wondered if they thought I lacked direction. If they were already adjusting expectations, if they saw me as temporary or manageable. The thought didn't sting the way I expected. It settled instead. Calm, observant. The kitchen noises stopped. His mother returned first, smoothing her hands on a towel. Dinner will be ready soon, she said. Why don't you two relax? She smiled again. Politer followed, his expression new. Pla. They had decided something. I could feel it, not spoken, but agreed upon. He stood, stretching slightly, completely at ease. It smells great, he said. I watched him move through the room like it belonged to him, and always would. I stayed seated for a moment longer. I realized then that playing smaller isn't always about fear. Sometimes it's about observation, about seeing who grows uncomfortable when you refuse to perform. As I stood to follow him, I caught sight of the hallway mirror. My reflection looked unchanged. Same sweater, same posture. But my eyes knew something new. Whatever conclusions they were drawing, they weren't about my worth. They were about their expectations, and those expectations had very little room for silence. We walked toward the dining room together, my hands still in his. Behind us, the living room returned to its careful stillness. Ahead of us, something waited, and I didn't know yet what it would cost to keep playing small. But I knew quietly, clearly, that the room had noticed, and it wouldn't forget. Kata. The laughter reached me before the room did. It slipped through the hallway, light and careless, like it had nothing to hide. I heard it just as I stepped closer, my hand brushing the back of a chair, my foot hesitating on the rug. It sounded warm, unforced. Then I crossed the threshold, and it stopped, not gradually, not awkwardly. It ended the way a machine does when someone pulls the plug without warning. The silence landed hard, heavy enough to feel in my shoulders. For a moment, no one moved. Faces held expressions they hadn't finished adjusting. Mouths paused halfway between laughter and something else. I stood there, aware of my breathing, of the way the air felt suddenly colder against my skin. "Oh," his mother said. "Just that!" "Can?" His father cleared his throat. Someone set a cup down too quickly, the porcelain clicking sharply against the saucer. The sound echoed longer than it should have. I smiled. It felt like the polite thing to do. "Sorry," I said softly, though I wasn't sure what I was apologizing for. No, his mother replied. "No, pie." She stopped herself. Just what? She didn't finish the sentence. Instead, she gestured vaguely toward the couch, an invitation that arrived a beat too late. "Come in," she said. "Sit." And I stepped forward. The carpet caught my foot slightly, like it hadn't expected me yet. I lowered myself onto the edge of the couch, careful not to disturb anything. The room settled into a new arrangement, one that included me, but something had been interrupted, and everyone felt it. The living room looked the same as before, neat, deliberate, arranged with quiet pride. But the atmosphere had shifted. It no longer floated, it pressed. I glanced at the half-closed door behind me. The one the laughter had come from. It stayed shut now. There was one the laughter had come from. It stayed shut now. Innocent. Silent. His father took a sip of his drink without looking at me. His jaw moved slowly, thoughtfully. His mother smoothed the front of her sweater, then folded her hands. He didn't notice. He was smiling, relaxed, unaware of the sharp edge that had entered the room. He sat beside me easily, like this was all unfolding exactly as expected. "Everything okay?" he asked lightly. "Yes," his mother said too quickly. "Of course," she smiled, but not with her eyes. The silence stretched again. No one rushed to fill it. It felt intentional this time, like everyone was waiting to see who would speak first. I stayed still. I had learned a long time ago that silence tells the truth if you let it. His father finally spoke. "So," he said, "we were just talking about," he paused, chose again, "old stories, old stuff rehearsed." "Safe." His mother nodded along. "Yes, childhood things." She laughed softly. Alone, the sound didn't travel far. I nodded politely. I nodded. I didn't ask which stories, but I wondered, had my name been said before I arrived? Had my absence made them bolder? I felt the weight of not knowing pressed gently against my chest. His mother stood and began rearranging the coffee table. The magazines were already straight, but she adjusted them anyway. She moved a coaster half an inch to the left, then right, order restored. "Well," she said brightly, "can I get anyone anything?" No one answered right away. "I'm fine," I said eventually. His father nodded. "I'm good." She hesitated, then went to the kitchen anyway. Her footsteps were measured, controlled. The moment she disappeared, the room exhaled just a little. His father glanced at me, then really looked. And there was something in his expression I hadn't seen before. Not unkindness, not suspicion, calculation. I met his gaze, held it calm. He gave a small nod, one that didn't invite conversation. Then he looked away. I shifted slightly on the couch. The cushion responded quietly. No protest. The clock on the wall ticked. Each second felt louder now, more aware of itself. I tried to imagine what the laughter had sounded like before it stopped, what tone it carried. Who had been speaking? Had it been about me? I didn't want to assume, but the timing felt precise, too precise. "Okay." His mother returned with a tray of drinks no one had asked for. She placed them down carefully, as if ceremony might smooth over the interruption. "There we go," she said. Better. She sat across from me, folding one leg over the other. Her posture was perfect, practiced. She asked me a question then, something small, harmless. "Do you take sugar?" "No," I said. She smiled again. That same polite curve. She nodded, as if that confirmed something. His father leaned back slightly, crossed his arms. Uncrossed them. No one mentioned the pause, no one explained it. The laughter was gone, replaced by something quieter. More watchful, he started talking again, filling the space the way he always did. About a neighbor he used to have, about a dog they once owned. His voice was warm, easy. I listened, smiled when appropriate, but part of me stayed alert. I noticed the way his mother watched me when she thought I wasn't looking, the way her eyes flicked to my hands, my posture, the spaces between my answers. I noticed how his father nodded more often now, short nods, like he was closing tabs in his mind. Whatever had been said before I arrived, it mattered. I felt it settle in my bones. That sense of having walked into the middle of something unfinished. The half-closed door stayed closed. It didn't creak. didn't offer clues. I wondered if I should have waited longer in the hallway, if arriving sooner or later would have changed anything, but timing rarely belongs to us. Cow. The conversation resumed its careful rhythm, polite, neutral, controlled, yet beneath it something had shifted. I realized then that first impressions aren't always formed when you enter a room, sometimes they're formed just before, and all you ever feel is the aftermath. As the afternoon light faded and the room grew dimmer, the pause lingered, unspoken, unresolved. It sat between us like an extra piece of furniture no one acknowledged. I didn't ask what I'd interrupted. I didn't need to, because the silence that followed told me enough. Whatever they had been saying, it wasn't meant to survive my presence, and that told me exactly how careful I would need to be next. The chair creaked when I sat down. Not loudly, just enough to announce that weight had shifted. I felt it in the room before I saw anything else. A thickness, like the air had been stirred and hadn't settled back yet. I rested my hands in my lap and let my eyes wander naturally slowly. As if I weren't looking for anything at all, that's when I noticed it. A framed photograph on the shelf, tilted slightly forward, not fallen turned, face down, deliberate. The corner of the frame caught the light, but the image stayed hidden. Next to it, a magazine lay open, pages stiff, something white peeked from beneath it, the edge of a document, paper that didn't belong in a stack meant for guests. It hadn't been there before. Or maybe it had, and I just hadn't been invited to see it yet. No one followed my gaze. His father sat across from me, posture rigid now, his hands rested on his knees, fingers interlocked too tightly. When our eyes almost met, he looked down, adjusted his sleeve, cleared his throat. His mother didn't look away. She studied me openly now, not rudely, not warmly, intently. Then, the way you look at something you suddenly recognize, but don't, to yet understand how it fits where it's been placed. She smiled once briefly, then didn't bother again. I felt it then, the shift. This wasn't evaluation anymore, and it was recognition. The clock on the wall ticked, louder than before. Each second sounded heavier, as if time itself had slowed to listen. He was still talking, something about a neighbor. A small story, familiar, comfortable, but his voice floated above the room now, disconnected from the current underneath. I nodded, when appropriate, spimmeled faintly. Inside, I had been here before, this moment. In conference rooms where people realized who was sitting across from them halfway through a sentence. At dinners where names suddenly carried weight they hadn't moments earlier. That pause, that recalibration, I hadn't expected to feel it here. His mother leaned forward slightly. You said you managed, she said carefully, various things. Yes, I replied. Mot mbummer rakam mon mot mog. Her eyes didn't blink. She was listening past the answer. And you work locally, she asked. The question arrived wrapped in casualness, but it landed precisely. I do, I said. Another pause. His father shifted in his chair. The wood creaked under him. He glanced toward the hallway, toward the half-closed door, then back to the floor. The document under the magazine seemed to breathe. I realized then that I had been placed somewhere in their minds. Quietly, swiftly, not as a guest, not as a future daughter, but as something undefined, unaccounted for, a variable. His mother nodded slowly, as if confirming something to herself. That must require a certain skill set, she said. Her tone was neutral, but cautious. It does, I replied. I didn't elaborate. Silence pooled again. It no longer felt awkward. It felt deliberate, as if everyone was afraid of saying the wrong thing now. His father finally looked up. His gaze brushed mine and retreated immediately, like he'd touched something hot. Like he'd touched something hot. I didn't chase it. I understood. They weren't afraid of offending me. They were afraid of revealing themselves. The photo stayed face down. The magazine didn't move. Whatever they thought they knew, or had just realized, they weren't ready to say aloud. His mother adjusted her seat, crossed her legs, uncrossed them. Her composure remained intact, but something in her eyes had sharpened. You seem very composed, she said. It sounded like an observation. It felt like a test. I value calm. I value calm, I said. It helps me see clearly. She watched me for a long moment, then she smiled again to Trounturn again. Then Treving Tampet man. This time, slower, more careful. Yes, she said. I imagine it does. He laughed lightly then, trying to pull the room back into place. She's always like that, he said. Nothing rattles her. I looked at him, really looked. He meant it as praise. As comfort, but it landed differently now. His mother glanced at him, then back at me. Something passed between her and her husband, a flicker, a shared understanding that didn't include him. I realized then that I had crossed an invisible line, not by speaking, but by not performing, by being too still, too precise by answering without filling space. The air felt charged now, not with hostility, but with caution. Kane, they were watching every word, every pause, afraid of misstepping. The category they'd placed me in wasn't unkind, but it wasn't familiar, and unfamiliar things make people careful. His father stood abruptly. "Kay, I'm going to check on dinner," he said. He didn't wait for a response. As he left, the chair scraped softly against the floor. The sound lingered. His mother followed him with her eyes until he disappeared down the hallway. Then she looked back at me. "Kang." Her expression softened slightly. "Just a touch. You have a very steady presence," she said. "That's rare." There it was. Not judgment, acknowledgement. I nodded once, thanked her quietly, but inside, something shifted. I understood now. Okay, they weren't measuring my worth, they were reassessing their assumptions about who I was, about what I knew, about what I might notice. The thought settled calmly in my chest. Power doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just sits quietly and waits for the room to adjust. The kitchen clattered faintly. Pots. Movement. Life resuming somewhere else. Here, the living room remained suspended. The photo stayed face down. The documents stayed hidden, but not forgotten. His mother finally leaned back, breaking eye contact. She picked up her cup, took a careful sip. "Well," she said lightly, as if resetting the tone. "Let's not sit in the dark." She reached for a lamp and turned it on. Warm light filled the corner of the room, but it didn't erase what had been seen. I felt the moment close gently, like a door not locked, but firmly shut. And as we stood to move toward the dining room, I caught one last glance at the shelf. The frame hadn't been turned back around. It didn't need to be. I had already seen enough. And as I followed them down the hallway, I understood something quietly, completely. They weren't afraid of saying the wrong thing. They were afraid I already knew the right one, and whatever came next, it wouldn't be spoken lightly. The dining room light was too bright for evening. It flattened everything, faces, food, feelings. The table had been set long before we sat down, plates centered perfectly. Cutlery aligned like it had been measured twice. The tablecloth fell evenly on both sides, untouched by wrinkles or doubt. Dinner was ready when we arrived, waiting like it had been expecting us to behave. We took our seats without discussion. He sat beside me, close enough that our arms almost touched. His parents across from us, posture straight, expressions composed. The first clink of cutlery sounded louder than it should have. Metal against ceramic, a clear, sharp note. His mother smiled and said something polite about the recipe. Her voice was pleasant. "Controlled, please," she said. "Eat while it's warm." We did. The food tasted good. Carefully seasoned, familiar, nothing adventurous, nothing that might divide opinion. I chewed slowly, aware of the rhythm of the table. Bite. Pause. Swallow. Pause. Swallow. Set the fork down gently. No one rushed. "So," his father said after a moment that had stretched just long enough to be noticed. "How long have you two been together now?" "Almost 3 years," he answered easily. His mother nodded. Pleased. "Time moves quickly." "Yes," I said. "It does." She looked at me then, briefly, as if weighing how I said it rather than what I meant. Questions followed, spaced evenly between mouthfuls. They arrived neutral, almost scripted. "Do you live far from work? Do you cook often? Do you prefer the city or something quieter?" I answered simply, short sentences, no elaboration. His father listened without interruption. His mother nodded at the ends of my replies, as if checking boxes. He talked more than usual, about plans, and about things he wanted to do someday. A small garden, a trip that didn't cost much, a life that stayed within clear lines. "I think simple is best," he said, smiling. His mother smiled back. His father hummed in agreement. I noticed how carefully they responded to him, how easily responded to him. But when I spoke, there was a pause first, a recalibration. They were listening differently now. I felt it when his mother asked about my family again, a detail she already knew. "And your parents," she said lightly. "They're nearby?" "No," I replied. "They're not." "Oh," she said. "That must be difficult." I nodded. Sometimes. She didn't ask more. The clinking of cutlery filled the space. A soft, constant sound like a clock counting something down. His father asked about my work again, slightly rephrased. As if the answer might change with repetition. "And your position," he said. "Does it offer stability?" There it was. The now pack of math and the whis. "Ning prickens sections and bit mens baxter drosens gau." "Yes," I said. Enough. Enough hung in the air. He smiled, but not with his eyes. "That's important," he said. These days, I took another bite, let the silence stretch. Across the table, his mother adjusted her napkin. smoothed it twice. She asked him a question then, about his job, about a recent project, about his supervisor. Her tone warmed, her attention softened. I watched him relax under it. He noticed something then, not clearly, just enough to feel it. He glanced at me briefly. His brow furrowed, then smoothed. "Everything okay?" he asked quietly. Yank. "Yes," I said, because it was, and it wasn't. He nodded, unconvinced but unwilling to push. The unease grew slowly, like a temperature change you don't notice until you're already cold. I realized then that the questions weren't meant to learn, they were meant to confirm what they already suspected. Or feared. I stayed in character, soft, modest, unassuming. But I could feel the edges of that role pressing in on me, tightening. His father asked one last question. Not about work, not directly. "What do you see for yourself?" he said. 5 years from now. The table went still, even the cutlery paused. I looked down at my plate. At the food I hadn't finished, I thought of the answers I used to give. Confident. Press eyes. Ambitious. I didn't use them. "I hope things feel balanced," I said, "that I still recognize myself." Yu Kang. His mother tilted her head. "Studied me." His father nodded slowly. "Once." "That's thoughtful," he said. Thoughtful sounded like a placeholder. The moment passed, or pretended to. Conversation resumed. Lighter now. Less probing. As if something had been decided, I realized then that the test had shifted. It wasn't about me anymore. It was about him, about what he knew, about what he didn't, about what they could say safely with him in the room. They were protecting something or someone, and I wasn't sure which. He laughed at something his mother said. The sound was genuine, easy. I smiled along. But inside I was listening for what wasn't being said. I noticed how his father avoided my eyes now, how his mother chose her words carefully when speaking to me, but freely when speaking to him. Yankee, they were afraid of crossing a line, not with me, with him. The realization settled quietly, firmly. Whatever truth lived here, it had weight. And history. Dinner ended without ceremony, plates cleared efficiently, compliments exchanged. "Thank you," I said. "It was lovely." His mother smiled. "Polite, measured, I'm glad," she replied. But her eyes flicked to her husband before she finished the sentence. We stood from the table. Chairs scraped softly against the floor. The sound lingered. He stretched, oblivious, talking about dessert, about coffee, about nothing. I followed him into the living room, my steps light, my posture calm, but my thoughts were sharp now. The tension at the table hadn't been accidental, it had been containment. They weren't worried about my answers. They were worried about the questions I hadn't asked. As I sat back down, the house seemed quieter than before. As if it were holding on to something fragile. I looked at him, at the ease in his face, the trust, and I understood something with absolute clarity. Whatever truth they were protecting, it wasn't from me, it was from him. And that meant the test, the real one, was only just beginning. The coffee had gone untouched for a while. I noticed it because the surface had stilled completely. No steam, no movement, just a dark circle reflecting the ceiling light like an unblinking eye. His mother was the one who spoke. Her voice was casual, almost careless. "I read an article the other day," she said, reaching for a napkin. "About a company. What was it called?" She paused, long enough to search her memory or choose her wording. I didn't look up right away. I stirred my coffee once, slowly listening to the spoon tap, the porcelain. Something like Aurelian Group, she said. She pronounced it wrong. Just slightly, one syllable softened, one consonant misplaced. But it was close enough to sting. My hand stilled mid-stir. The spoon rested against the cup, silent. I held my breath without meaning to. Aurelian. I hadn't heard that name spoken out loud in years. Not here, not like this. I kept my eyes on the coffee, watched the small ripple fade, counted the seconds it took for my reflection to return. "Oh," I said quietly, "I'm not familiar." Whack. It came out smooth, too smooth. Across from me, his father shifted. The chair creaked under his weight. He glanced at his wife, not quickly, but not slowly either, a look they thought I didn't see it. His mother smiled faintly, still holding the napkin. "Yes," she continued, "some consulting firm, quite successful apparently." Successful. The word hung there, careful and deliberate. I nodded once, non-committal. "That's interesting," I said. Inside, something tightened, not panic. Ruckugation. Aurelian Group had been my life for almost a decade. I knew the hallways, the conference rooms, the way the logo caught light at certain angles. I knew which floors creaked and which executives drank their coffee black. I knew exactly how people pronounced the name when they wanted to sound like they belonged. She didn't. And which made this worse, he was scrolling through his phone, oblivious, smiling at something on the screen. He didn't hear the tension slip into the room. His mother glanced at him briefly, then back at me. They were talking about leadership culture, she said lightly, about how demanding it can be. Demanding? Another word placed carefully. And yes, I said, that kind of environment usually is. She raised her eyebrows slightly, just enough. Oh, you said. You do know it? I lifted my gaze then, met her eyes. Only in general terms, I replied. And the silence that followed was thin, stretched tight. His father cleared his throat. It sounded intense, he said. Not exactly family-friendly, there it was. I leaned back slightly, letting the chair support me. Felt the fabric of my sweater against my arms. Grounded myself in texture. Some places value sacrifice, I said. Others value sustainability. His mother smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Yes, she said. I suppose that's true. Ken. They exchanged another glance, shorter this time, sharper. This one carried confirmation. I realized then that this wasn't coincidence. Not entirely. They hadn't stumbled onto the name by accident, not with that timing, not with those looks. They knew something or suspected. I felt the old instinct rise, the one that wanted to clarify, to correct, to claim space. The woman who used to introduce herself with titles and credentials, I pressed her down gently. Not yet. He finally looked up from his phone. What are we talking about? He asked. His mother waved a hand dismissively. Oh, just something I read, work stuff, his father added quickly. He nodded, uninterested. Sounds boring. I smiled at him. He smiled back, easy unaware. The room felt suddenly smaller, like the walls had leaned in just a little. I wondered how much they knew, who had told them, or if they had found it themselves. Had they Googled my name? Had they connected dots I'd carefully kept apart? The thought didn't frighten me. Yeah, it clarified. His mother took a sip of her coffee. Finally, anyway, she said, it's not important. But she didn't move on right away. She waited. I didn't fill the space. The clock ticked. Steady, patient. His father adjusted the edge of a magazine on the table, the same one from earlier. It shifted slightly, just enough to reveal the corner of that document again. I didn't look at it. I didn't need to. Whatever was written there had already served its purpose. He stood up suddenly, stretching. I'm going to grab some dessert, he said. Anyone wants. I'm going to grab some dessert, he said. Anyone else? I'm fine, I said. His parents declined as well. When he left the room, something loosened and tightened at the same time. His mother leaned back in her chair. Studied me openly now. You're very You're very composed, she said again. Not many people are. I've had practice, I replied. Her lips pressed together briefly. Then she nodded. Yes, she said. I imagine you have. Yeah, the mispronounced name echoed quietly in my mind, a reminder of how close we were to speaking plainly. But we didn't. We circled instead, careful, massacred. His father finally spoke, his voice low, contrite. We value transparency, he said. In this family, I met his gaze. Smiled. So do I said. The word settled between us, not aggressive, not defensive, honest. He held my eyes for a moment longer than before, then looked away. The test was no longer subtle. The kitchen light hummed softly above us. Not loud enough to be noticed at first, just loud enough to fill the silence when nothing else did. Plates soaked in the sink. The water had gone still, a thin film forming on the surface. I watched it as his mother wiped the counter slowly, methodically, as if the motion itself were a kind of thinking. We're number time the shumber ning, we're tuntai nita that tower rein tan ning. Would you mind handing me that towel? She asked. I did. Our fingers brushed for a moment. UK? She didn't pull away quickly. Neither did I. The rest of the house felt far away now. Muffled voices from the living room. His laughter, easy and unaware. The sound of a television turning on. Here, everything was quieter. Thank you, she said. She folded the towel neatly, set it aside, straightened it again. For a while, we worked without speaking. Dishes, small movements, familiar sounds, the clink of ceramic, the scrape of a plate against the sink. It almost felt normal. Then she spoke. You're very considerate, she said. You're very considerate, she said. The way you help without being asked. I smiled faintly. I was raised that way. She nodded, still focused on the counter. Yes, she said. I imagine you were. Something in her tone shifted. Just slightly. I waited. You macrobast han sictionai cons a recommendation. I waited. Slightly. I waited. She turned then, leaning against the counter, arms crossed loosely. Her posture softened. Not defensive. Careful. She said, it's not always easy to read people. No, I agreed, it isn't. She studied my face, not my clothes, not my hands, my eyes. But some people, she continued, carry themselves differently, like they've seen more. The hum of the light seemed louder suddenly. I chose my words slowly. Experience has a way of doing that, she smiled. A real one this time. Yes, almost said, she said. It does. She turned back to the sink, rinsing her hands though they were already clean. Water rushed, then stopped. I hope you don't mind me asking, she said gently, but where did you learn to be so measured? And there it was, not a question, an opening. I've had time, I said, to learn what matters to me. She nodded again, but her eyes stayed fixed on my reflection in the window above the sink, dark glass. Night pressed close on the other side. And what matters to you now? She asked. I met her gaze through the reflection. Peace, I said, and honesty. To Kang. She held my eyes for a moment longer than necessary, then looked away. That's admirable, she said quietly. Her voice softened then, almost tender. I worry about my son, she added. He trusts easily. The words settled between us, heavy. Careful, I know, I said. It's one of the things I love most about him. She glanced at me quickly. Surprise flickered across her face before she smoothed it away. You speak about him kindly, she said. I mean it. Silence returned, different now, not awkward. Intentional. Shefty tainteen haften tan cat. She dried her hands slowly, folded the towel again, set it down. You understand, she said, not quite asking that we want what's best for him. Yes, I replied, I do. I do. Ken, she sighed then. A small sound. Tired. We've seen situations, she said, where people weren't transparent. And there it was again, transparency. I leaned back against the counter opposite her. Gave her space, gave myself space. I believe in being clear, I said. When the time is right, she nodded, slowly, as if weighing whether to accept that. And when is the right time, she asked. The question hung between us. Quiet, sharp, when clarity does more good than harm, I said. She looked at me then, really looked. Not with suspicion, with understanding. I thought so, she said. The words surprised me. Okay, she reached for a mug, turned it in her hands, didn't drink. We've known for a little while, she said softly. I didn't ask what she meant. I let her continue. Not everything, she added quickly, but enough to know you're not exactly who you appear to be. I nodded once. She exhaled, relieved. We didn't want to pry, she said, but we wanted to be prepared. And for what? I asked. She hesitated. For the possibility, she said, that there might be differences. Such a gentle word. I don't want to disrupt his sense of stability, she continued. He values simplicity. He always has. So do I said. She smiled faintly. Yes, she said, but simplicity means different things to different people. We stood there facing each other across the narrow kitchen, two women both careful, both protective of different things. How long? I asked quietly. She understood. A few weeks, she said. Before the visit, I nodded. Let the information settle. And what do you want? I asked. She looked surprised by the directness, then thoughtful. I want to know, she said slowly, whether you plan to stay. The question landed softly, but it carried weight. I'm here, I said. That's not accidental. She searched my face for something. I didn't hide it. Ken. After a moment, she nodded. I believe you, she said. Her shoulders relaxed slightly. Just a little. But you understand, she added, why we're cautious. Yes, I said. I do. The tension between us eased, not gone, but shifted, like something fragile set down gently instead of held too tightly. Kang, from the living room, his laughter rose again, uncomplicated, bright. She glanced toward the sound, then back at me. Okay, he doesn't need to know everything, she said. Not yet, I agreed. Her eyes softened. Thank you, she said, for being patient. I smiled. Thank you for being honest. We stood there a moment longer, the hum of the light. The quiet understanding. Then she straightened, composure returning like a familiar coat. Shall we go back? She asked. Yes, I said. As we walked toward the doorway, she paused. One more thing, she said. I turned. Be gentle with him, she said. Whatever comes next. I nodded. I will. We stepped back into the living room together. The noise resumed. The world continued, but something had shifted. The truth was no longer hidden. It was waiting. And I knew now it wouldn't stay quiet much longer. The porch light flickered once before settling into a steady glow. It cast a pale circle on the driveway, soft around the edges, like it didn't want to be too sure of itself. The night air felt cooler than before, sharper. I wrapped my coat tighter as we stepped outside, the door closing behind us with a sound that felt final, at least for the evening. He walked ahead of me at first, just a step or two, enough to notice. The gravel shifted under our feet. Each crunch sounded louder than it should have. Honest. Unavoidable. We didn't speak until we were inside the car. The engine started. The familiar hum filled the space between us. He pulled onto the road without looking over, eyes focused straight ahead. The house receded in the side mirror neat. Still, watching us leave, I waited until the first stoplight, until the red glow painted his face softly from below. There's something I need to tell you, I said. He didn't flinch, just nodded. Okay, he replied. The word carried more weight than it should have. The drive back felt longer. The road darker. Streetlights passed in steady intervals, like markers counting us towards something unavoidable. When we reached my apartment, neither of us moved right away. The car idled, the light stayed red. King, do you want to talk now? He asked gently, or later? No, I said. Can. Inside, the apartment greeted us with familiarity, lamps left exactly where I'd left them, the faint scent of soap. Quiet that felt earned, I took off my coat, hung it carefully. My hands shook just enough to notice. We sat across from each other at the small kitchen table, the one we'd shared countless dinners at. The one that knew us. I folded my hands, unfolded them. I didn't tell you everything about my work, I began. He stayed still, listening. I used to have a different career, I continued, one that paid very well. His brow furrowed slightly. Confusion, not anger. I chose to leave it, I said. On purpose. Silence. I told him about the offices, the hours, the weight of expectations that followed me everywhere. I didn't dramatize it. I didn't need to. I was tired, I said. Not physically. In a deeper way, he nodded slow. I chose this life, I said, gesturing gently around us, because it felt like breathing again. He looked down at the table, ran his thumb along the edge. And you didn't tell me because, he asked quietly, because when we met, I said you loved me without knowing any of that. And I loved that. The truth sat between us, raw, unadorned. I didn't want it to change the way you saw me, I added. Or the way we built this. He leaned back slightly, exhaled. I wish you'd trusted me with it, he said. Not accusing, just honest. I know, I replied. That's the part I'm still sitting with. I told him about his parents. About the questions, the looks, the names spoken wrong. I wanted to see who they were, I said, before they knew who I was. He closed his eyes briefly, ran a hand through his hair. It was a Commodore Erekic. So it was a test, he said. Yes, I admitted, but not of you. But not of you. He opened his eyes again. Looked at me fully now. Still, he said. It involves me, I know, I said again. Softer this time. The silence stretched. Heavy, but not hostile. Chentern dadrum de briste. The silence stretched. Heavy, but not hostile, I feel. Hurt, he said finally. Not because of what you did, but because I wasn't part of the choice. The words landed cleanly, fairly, and I'm sorry, I said. For that, he nodded. Yeah. He nodded. Accepted it, but I also understand, he added after a moment, why you did it. That surprised me. Yeah, you've always chosen intention, he said. Even when it's uncomfortable, I swallowed. I just didn't think it would reach my parents like this, he continued. I didn't realize they'd go looking. Yen, I didn't either, I said. But now they know something, or enough to be cautious. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. So what do we do now? He asked. Yeah, the question felt heavier than the room. We decide together, I said, how much truth they deserve. And when he thought about it, really thought they're protective, he said. Sometimes to a fault, I've noticed, I replied gently. Okay. He smiled faintly, then grew serious again. I don't want to lie to them, he said. But I also don't want them shaping their opinions of you based on numbers and titles. That's exactly why I stepped back from that life, I said. He nodded. Yeah, maybe, he said slowly, we tell them the truth, but not doublet, but not all at once. Not as a revelation, just as context. I considered it. I can do that, I said, as long as it's honest. He reached across the table then, took my hand. His grip was warm, steady. My the Sephan Savan the Pration and the Bermunda Semen Sab and on your maze to bass. I don't care how much you made, he said, or what you used to do. I met his eyes. And I care about why you chose to be here, he continued, with me. The tightness in my chest eased. That hasn't changed, I said. I know, he replied. And we sat like that for a while, hands joined, breathing matching. Outside, a car passed. Somewhere, a dog barked once and stopped. The night went on. There's one more thing, I said. He waited. I don't want to play small anymore, I said. Not with you. He squeezed my hand. Then don't. Not rip my hand, he said. Just don't disappear from me again, I nodded. I won't. We stood eventually, moved toward the window. I won't. Looked out at the quiet street below. The porch light from earlier felt far away now, a different world. Okay, honesty hadn't broken us, but it had changed the shape of things. As we turned off the lights and prepared for sleep, I felt something settle. Not relief exactly, alignment. Still, one question lingered, unspoken but present. How would his parents respond when the truth stood in full daylight? And would the life we'd built remain intact once everyone could finally see it? The answer waited. Just beyond the next morning, the morning came without announcement, no alarm, no rush. Light crept through the curtains, slowly, pale and patient, touching the edges of the room like it was asking permission. I lay still, listening to the building wake up around me, the hum of pipes, a door closing somewhere below, footsteps moving past my window. Comtiding Nartinian. The visit was over, but the quiet it left behind wasn't. I dressed without thinking too much about it. The same sweater, the same worn shoes. I noticed how familiar everything felt again, how my body loosened the moment I stepped back into this life. Outside, the air was cool, clean. The street looked ordinary in the way that feels comforting after something heavy. Cars parked unevenly. A grocery bag abandoned near the curb, nothing watching me. We didn't linger when we left their house. No final conversation, no forced closure, just polite goodbyes and careful smiles. His mother hugged me briefly. Her arms were light around my shoulders. She smelled like soap and my shoulders. She smelled like soap and something floral. She didn't say much, just thanked me for coming. His father nodded, firm, reserved. He met my eyes for a moment longer than before, then looked away. That was all. The door closed behind us without ceremony, no pause, no lingering sound. In the car, we drove in silence for a while, not the tense kind, a thoughtful kind, the kind that doesn't need fixing. He reached for my hand at a red light. I let him. Erka, back home, Sek, back the home now. Back home now if I made tea and forgot about it halfway through. The kettle clicked off on its own. Steam rose and disappeared into the air. I sat at the small table by the window and watched the street move, people passing with groceries. A dog pulling its owner along impatiently, a woman laughing into her phone. Life continued. Rurkstistan. Canned. I thought about the house we'd left behind, how careful everything had been, how measured, how much effort went into appearing settled. What I learned there wasn't about politeness, it was about fear. The fear of not knowing who someone really is, the fear of being outpaced, the fear of discovering that stability can look different than expected, and pride, quiet, fragile, easily threatened by things it doesn't recognize. I hadn't gone there to prove anything. I hadn't gone to deceive. I had gone to observe, and I had seen enough. They saw me as a question, as an interruption, as something that didn't fit neatly into their understanding of the world, but they also saw restraint, composure, silence that didn't beg to be filled, and that unsettled them more than any title ever could have. I folded laundry later that afternoon, paired socks that didn't match perfectly anymore, smoothed shirts that had softened with time. My hands moved automatically, comfortably. This life asked very little of me and gave me everything back in return. There was power in that, not the kind that announces itself, not the kind that needs witnesses, the kind that chooses when to speak and when not to. I thought about the version of myself I had folded away years ago, the one who thrived on momentum, on recognition, on being the sharpest presence in the room. She hadn't been wrong, Ekund, but she wasn't who I needed to be anymore. The woman who sat quietly at that dinner table had been just as real, just as capable, just more selective about where she placed her weight. That was the choice I made again that day, not to shrink but to remain intact. As evening settled in, he came home with groceries and stories about nothing important. We cooked together, ate standing up, laughed. When something burned slightly, it felt easy. Later, as we sat on the couch with the lights low, I thought about the question that lingered. Who truly saw me that day? His parents had seen an outline, a suggestion, enough to unsettle them, but not enough to understand. He had seen me fully, not all at once, but steadily, with patience, and I had seen myself clearer than before. The visit hadn't ended with answers, but it had ended with certainty. Some power is loud. Some announces itself through rooms and resumes and names spoken correctly, and some power is choosing silence, choosing simplicity, and choosing a life that doesn't need permission to be enough. I turned off the last light and stood for a moment in the dark. The apartment breathed around me, familiar, safe. Whatever came next, whatever truths surfaced in time, I knew where I stood. And that was something no one else could take from me. The house down the road would keep its secrets, its assumptions, its careful pride. I carried none of that with me, only the quiet certainty of having chosen my life again, and knowing exactly why.